She's facing the truth.
Train me to compete.
He's facing his fear.
Here comes the Cloud9!
The last time I rode, I almost died.
And together,
Tell me this gets easier.
After about 50 more times.
they'll risk it all
Big air!
to get back on top.
The Cloud9 could be a second chance for both of us.
It's too dangerous!
For me or for you?
Hello Internet, and welcome to the DCOM review. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at Cloud9. Disney Channel must have finally gotten around to reading my years of emails because in 2014, we got not one, but two Paul Hoen movies. Cloud9 is a movie where it seems that the most interesting details are actually hidden in the background, while our two leads and the sport of snowboarding take center stage. Sound intriguing? Don't worry, we'll get there. Disney Channel figured we clearly don't have enough extreme sports movies, so why not make another one? But for me, this wasn't just another snowboarding movie. I didn't have a lot of access to Disney Channel in the year 2013 when Liv and Maddie premiered, so this movie was my introduction to the one and only Dove Cameron. Haha, I could have sworn I had gotten that fix. Just hold up a second right here. Oh, where'd that thing go?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
Thank you. As I was saying, let's dive into Cloud9. So our story starts off at a local snowboarding competition where we meet the members of Team Swift, featuring Nick Swift, Kayla Morgan, and their forgettable background teammates. Their team wins the competition, but you can tell there's something off with their coach, who is also Nick's dad. Soon after, we're introduced to Will Cloud, portrayed by Luke Benward. Hard to believe, but remember that little kid who invented the time machine in Minutemen? Yep, that's him. We learn later that he used to be a big-time snowboarder before he attempted a trick that nearly cost him his life. Team Swift is celebrating at a party later that night when we see Nick in a serious conversation with his dad. This leads to a scene where the team swipes Will's sled and decides that it would be a great idea to slide down a mountain with it. But while Nick and Kayla are on it, Nick loses control and bails out, causing Kayla to crash into a sign, breaking it and Will's sled in the process. Luckily for Kayla, her dad owns the entire lodge, so she's not in too much trouble. However, they make her pay for Will's sled by forcing her to help out around his dog kennel. Obviously, Kayla isn't too thrilled about recent developments, but things get even worse once she finds out that she's been kicked off the team for her conduct violation. And in case it's not obvious enough by now, yes, her entire team, as well as her coach, were all in on the idea of framing her so that the coach would have a viable reason to kick her off the team before Fire and Ice, which is the ultimate snowboarding competition. And to make matters even worse, it's soon revealed that Kayla's parents, or at least her dad, were in on the idea of fixing her snowboarding competitions. They claim that they were doing this to quote-unquote protect her, but I'll get into why that just doesn't fly later. But with the once great Will Cloud in her corner, she tries to convince him to train her, which he eventually does because, come on, who's gonna say no to that smile? So they get to training, but in the meantime, Team Swift has hired another female boarder by the name of Sky Sailor, who is known by many to be one of the very best, and to win Fire and Ice, Kayla will have to beat her. In light of that, Kayla wants Will to teach her the Cloud9, the same trick that forced Will to leave snowboarding behind. Will is hesitant to teach her for that very reason, so Kayla decided that the only way to convince him that she can handle a board trick on a halfpipe is to do something 1,000 times more dangerous by snowboarding down the highest, scariest, most vertical peak in all the lands. After crashing into a sign and coming away uninjured, I feel pretty confident in my theory that Kayla is actually immortal, so she goes down and eventually causes an avalanche that buries her, but not so deep that Will and his dog can't find her. So, in the aftermath of all this, Will finally agrees to teach Kayla the Cloud9, and intelligently does so in broken down parts, as opposed to throwing everything at her all at once. He is also ready to officially join the team, with enough convincing from Kayla of course. And during all this time, they are continually developing chemistry, which eventually leads to, what else? But before Fire and Ice starts, Coach Swift begins to realize that Kayla can, in fact, snowboard, and tries to convince her to rejoin the team. And if you're at all surprised that she chooses to decline his, shall we say, generous offer, then you must be new to all this. So the competition starts. Will Cloud just barely loses out to Nick Swift, which leads to him confronting his father. As he tries to apologize to Kayla, it also leads to history's least favorite excuse.
I was just following orders.
A little bit before that, we get a bit where Kayla's father is finally apologizing to her for never truly believing in her. So, long story short, Sky pulls off a great score that Kayla could only beat by being perfect, so she goes for the Cloud9, nails it, and her team wins the whole thing. Classic storybook ending. But does this movie work? A large plot point in this film is the eventual realization that Kayla actually isn't as great as she thought she was, but I don't really buy that. She's clearly an avid snowboarder, which means she would look at videos of boarders like Sky Sailor and realize, wait a minute, I can't do some of those things. Not to mention her scores are pretty lackluster in the beginning, and she knows that, which means she could have improved just based on that alone, and not settle with barely scraping out wins against inferior females her dad set her up against. But this leads into probably the most intriguing aspect of the movie, the parents. Yeah, it's Dove and Luke's characters that get the lion's share of the screen time, but everything about this movie is orchestrated by Mr. Morgan and Coach Swift. Mr. Morgan wanted his daughter on the team but didn't want her trying too hard, so he convinced Coach Swift, likely with a large sum of money, to allow her to think that she was better than she actually was. Now, it's one thing to protect your kids, but this is crossing a line. The process of snowboarding alone is enough to risk injury, and it's not like Mr. Morgan shows the same level of concern when he eventually learns of Kayla snowboarding off a mountain miles in the air. It's pretty weak reasoning, especially for a successful businessman like him, who owns an entire lodge and also knows that it took a lot of hard work to get to where he is. He should be that much more adamant about teaching his daughter the power of hard work and allowing her to fail sometimes, because that's how we learn to get back up and succeed. He's portrayed by Patrick Fabian, the same guy that was the villain Thanos in those god-awful Twitches movies, so I guess it's only fitting that his plans aren't very well thought out. Meanwhile, Coach Swift is manipulative to the point that borders on sociopathic. All he cares about is success, and his plan to get Kayla kicked off the team could have seriously injured her. Think about that for a minute. Coach Swift's plan was to get his teenage son to literally ram Kayla through a sign, knowing that it would give him the reason he needed to drop her. That's absolutely mental. No, seriously, this guy needs professional help. If I could theorize on this guy's backstory, I'd be willing to bet that in his youth, he loved to ride, just for the fun of it. But he suffered from a life-changing event as a result of fooling around, maybe an injury or a lost loved one, which might explain the absence of a Mrs. Swift. Now his no-nonsense, win-at-all-cost mentality makes more sense, since he doesn't want his son making his mistakes, so he controls every aspect of his life to ensure his success. And I'd also theorize that there's a little resentment between Coach Swift and Mr. Morgan, perhaps from a past that the movie never delves into. They're never really on screen that much together, but Mr. Morgan has all this success and Coach Swift is, well, just a coach. It seems fair to assume that Coach Swift would love to trade places if he could, and maybe he sees his son snowboarding as a step towards that same success. But all of this, of course, is speculative, but I would never put it past the great Paul Hohen to intentionally leave certain movie details out so that you can only infer from the actions of the characters. We've got Luke Benward as Will Cloud, and he really plays this role well. He always comes off as someone who knows a lot about snowboarding from his days riding, but also respects the sport enough to call out Kayla for thinking that she's better than she is. And yeah, it's not exactly a huge shocker that he eventually decides to ride again, but hey, if this girl asked me to skateboard down a volcano, I would seriously consider it. He's also a genuinely good coach, especially compared to the other coach this movie settles us with, because he not only knows how to communicate with people, but he understands the hard work that goes into doing something the right way, because for him, it's substance over style any day, and I could not agree with him more. Nick Swift, portrayed by Mike Manning, is just a dick.
I was just following orders.
I don't care. He's smug, he's cocky, and let's face it, there's a part of him that actually enjoyed just breaking Kayla's heart despite all of his daddy issues. He's lucky I'm not a star in the movie, otherwise our interaction would have gone something like this.
I must break you.
But beyond those guys and the parents, there's not too many impactful players here. Kayla's friends are just background noise, Will's teammates are barely characters, and the rest of Team Swift is just a bunch of forgettable jocks. So, without further ado, let's get to the real star of this movie, the one and only Dove Cameron. Alright, keep it together, Disney brain. That wasn't even PG. My goodness. Ahem. Anyways, I actually think Dove's portrayal of Kayla Morgan is good, just not great. I know, strange coming from me, but it's kind of true. She does well as a fashionista who decides to work a bit harder to become a better snowboarder, but I just didn't see anything particularly special about her performance. I've seen Kayla-like characters in plenty of movies before, and outside of being the one and only Dove Cameron, she doesn't add too much to the role, it pains me to say. But it was also my first time seeing her in any role, so there's no denying that this movie definitely got me on the path to fandom. So, again, nothing bad in this performance, just nothing too memorable. And that's Cloud 9. So, what's the verdict? Cloud 9 is a solid, surprisingly short movie from end to end, but there are a lot of DCOMs I would put ahead of it. The snowboarding is okay, and honestly, I think someone like Steve Boyem or Brink director Chris Beeman could have gotten a bit more out of the extreme sports aspects of the film. At the end of the day, it's a pretty standard tale about a disgraced former athlete finding his passion again through another energetic but undisciplined athlete that just needs a little push to be great. Outside of a couple of the character details that we've discussed, it's a story everyone's seen before. Heck, the same general plot thread could apply to the Mighty Ducks movies. I love the underdog story more than most, but it never really felt like anyone's dreams were unobtainable. For example, Sky was built up as this superstar boarder, but I was never convinced that she was that much better than Kayla. If the movie went the route of starting Kayla off as a legitimately bad snowboarder, we would have gotten a much better feel for how stacked the odds were against our main characters, which would have made the conclusion much more satisfying. Ask yourself, did you ever really doubt that Kayla would find a way to pull off the Cloud 9 to win the whole tournament? This film's happy ending just isn't earned to the same degree as other movies about overcoming the odds. But there are some really well done details as well. Remember that scene where Sam comes into Will's dog kennel and is seeing double? A clever shout out to the twin effect present in Liv and Maddie. Remember how Kayla's board says New Moon on it? That's actually a clever reference to the Twilight film of the same name, because in both films, a pre-established love interest breaks things off with the lead female character, only to have her spend more time with another character of comparable physical ability. Regardless of your feelings for Twilight, that's really smart. All in all, I had plenty of fun with this movie, but it's not one of Paul Verhoeven's stronger films, and based on the proven science of IMDb ratings, I think this movie is actually a little overrated. Especially when you compare it to the vastly superior movie that also came out that year. Good, but not great. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, help me out with the likes and the subs, and don't forget to share this video all over social media. It really helps, and comment with what DCOM I should tackle next. Until then...
It's impossible.
Nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Nothing's impossible.